Welcome to our dating special part 2 with none other than confidence coach Claire. She would have said that way better.
No, she wouldn't have said confidence coach Claire. She would have said confidence coach Claire Elizabeth coaching.
Okay.
Discoverable on Instagram.
Right.
You can
okay.
keep going. I'm just saying that's how she would have said it.
That's what she should have said. She also sells seashells on the seashore. So we have got part 2, following on from our initial dating episode, 6 months leading up to Valentine's Day, with now our Valentine's special with Claire, sharing all sorts of, again, amazing chat, advice, whatever you want to call it. We have a great conversation on this. We talk about emotional availability, the importance of looking inward and starting that dating process by really being in a position to best meet that person that's right for you. And that has to start with looking inwards. We talk about dating apps, finding out more about people, fatigue, and ultimately about honesty and connection. Claire's going to answer some great would you rathers from Nibbo, where we even compare cyborgs with real humans. This episode has got lots for you to get into, so give it a listen.
And if you're sat at home listening to this on Valentine's Day, and happy Valentine's Day, by the way, but if you know another singleton that would just benefit from hearing a conversation about the world of dating and about how it's really imperfect, then share this episode to them, because the more people that hear, I think, this perspective from both genders, the more valuable it's going to be. So, here's the show.
Claire, welcome back to the show. This really, if we're honest, this is the show that everyone's been waiting for since exactly 6 months to the day of Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
People have been wondering, what happened on the day? Where are you now? What's been going on? I have to say, we had so much positive feedback about you being on as a guest and just the way that you spoke and the stuff that you shared. So it genuinely is great to have you back on. I know people will be really interested in what you've got to say, as will Nibbo and I. So yeah, we're really, really looking forward to this Valentine's special that we're just going to dive straight into.
I'm excited to be back with my playful penises, as we said on my podcast. And if people don't know what it means, they're going to have to go and watch the episode that you came on mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen to Claire's podcast as well. So we're going to try to keep the pace up tonight at a fairly sort of rapid pace. One thing I do just want to say to our listeners, because we're putting this out on Valentine's Day, because dating, we think, has a big impact on people's mental health, that you poor, sad, lonely losers, if you're sat at home listening to this on Valentine's Day, which I expect I will be.
Me.
And so will Claire. 2/3 of us who are doing a podcast on dating are as single as it can possibly get.
Yeah, but that's healthy, because that shows that we're not those people that have to be in relationships for the sake of it, because we like ourselves.
Yeah, Brad.
Hey, don't you guys?
Brad's the model of a healthy relationship. We're really happy for him, but I think that there's definitely something empowering about being single and being okay with that, and not being in things for the sake of it. And I think you and Matt, are probably in that bracket of
I definitely put myself in that bracket.
Is that a choice?
I like talking to people on dating apps, but it takes a lot for me to think I would actually want to go out and spend time with this person. I'm quite happy if a conversation's boring me to say, I don't think this is going anywhere. And
I think it's such an important thing almost to kick off with, even before we started. And I actually thought about this as I was driving back to do the podcast. I listened to the previous show last night, and I was kind of thinking about things for tonight. And one of the things that really resonated with me, because I knew this would come up, this dynamic, now that I'm not the singleton. But what I think was really, really important is I was like, if the rest of my life is just me and Bowden, absolutely comfortable with that, and that I think is a really important bit, and that's what you're alluding to, Claire, isn't it? That fact that actually you guys aren't going to just take something because actually it feels like we should and the clock's ticking and that sort of thing. It's about actually, no, it's got to be of a good enough standard, otherwise it's not happening.
It's got to, in my opinion, it's got to add to my already great life. So I think if you're happy with your lot, which is the sort of vibration you want to be in when you're dating, you don't want to be like, oh, my life's shit and I'm shit, because that's not going to attract the right person anyway.
And the opposite gender are shit as well.
Yeah,
I hear a lot of that.
Yeah, same. So I think that if you're in that sort of mentality, I think it's a good place to be, to take your time to meet the right person rather than just being with somebody for the sake of it. I just don't see the point. And I think the more you take your time with being single, the more you enjoy your own company. And that is a real blessing, because I think it brings the focus to even more what you can bring to somebody when you meet the right person. But it does take a lot of filtering, and I think that you've got to be fussy about who you sort of end up with. Definitely.
What a strong start. Claire, I'm going to jump into a question. We don't have a question about actual food takeaways this evening. If anyone has missed it, we asked you on the last dating special, which was exactly 6 months prior to today, what would be a great date takeaway? And you were saying that actually takeaways on a date is not really your thing, because that means you're going to have to be in someone's home. And if you are indoors too soon, then that's going to roll the ball faster than it needs to go. So I wonder if you would just talk us through your ideal dinner date. And I think Brad and I will listen to that in terms of what the man's role is, because of those pressures that men feel about providing and protecting and procreating. I'm interested to hear, like, how would your ideal dinner date go? And we'll see if we can pick the bones out of the stuff you say.
As in who I go with, where I go, or all of it?
Well, like, it's got to be a date. It can't be like a girl's thing.
Yeah. So first of all, like a dinner date for me would be like, I wouldn't go on one of those for at least 3 dates.
And why is that? I'm fascinated in that already.
I think it's quite intense. Like sitting and having food with someone can sometimes feel a bit stilted. And I think you want to have built up that sort of slight easiness between you before you sit and have a meal. I think it's different. Like say you went to a pub for drinks and then you end up getting a bit of food. That's a bit different. But if you're going for like an official like dinner, I think I want to know the person a bit more to be doing that. And also just from, we talked a little bit about this before, about the paying aspect of it and, all the conversations around that. I wouldn't expect, in an ideal world, if you're looking for like a healthy masculine energy and you want a guy that leads and all of that lot, it is nice that if the guy is the person that has asked you out for dinner, that they would potentially offer to pay. But I wouldn't expect that from someone that doesn't know me. Like I'd expect that a few dates in and they're like, yeah, I'm interested enough in this girl that's someone I would actually really properly want to date. So I think it avoids those awkward things too. If you keep the first couple casual and like less expensive.
I heard some amazing wisdom around that, and it was just after. I heard so many great things just after we'd recorded our last dating special. I heard some amazing wisdom around that, about that on a dinner date, a guy can hide behind how much he spends. So if you went on a dinner date with a guy and you weren't actually really that compatible, but he's dropped 300 quid on dinner, I think you're going to be tempted, might be the wrong word, just persuaded to go on a second date with that guy, when actually you might be feeling like, I don't think we're actually really compatible. But he's just dropped 300 quid on some chips for you.
And if you're a people pleaser, then you're going to think, worse, Matt, you feel like you might have to shag them, which is really like not great. And I definitely wouldn't be in that energy. But if you're someone with quite low self-esteem and you're a people pleaser, and this guy is going to like spend all this money on you, you might feel a pressure that you have to like repay them in some way. And I just think it's just, the dinner is for, I think, a little bit more established connection. So a few dates in, like you've had a walk, you've had a coffee, you work out you fancy each other, you both find each other quite interesting. So ideal for me would be that I do think it would be lovely if he came up with the place. You know, maybe he's asked me a few questions already about the sort of thing I like, and he's used a bit of initiative. He showed that he's listened and he's picked a place, because I think that is quite sexy, and it shows that, you know, he can plan things, which if I'm going to be in a relationship with somebody, I'm a planner, but I would really like the same equal energy in future relationships, that, you know, we both do a bit of planning. So it just shows like tick, you know, he can do that, and you know, that's lovely. I think I would go for something maybe not messy, like not messy food. You know what I mean? Like a dripping burger or something. So maybe more of like a tapas or like a picky food. I don't know. Thai maybe.
Tapas is a great shout. I went on
Yeah.
a second date for tapas once, and I like food, and I like food that's like got a little bit of spice to it. And I forget what it was, maybe some sausage or something. And it wasn't excessively spicy. It just hit my throat in the wrong way. I was literally dying right there at the table, just like bright red, eyes watering. Got a third date, mind you, so it couldn't have been that bad, but
You styled out the sweating, clearly.
yeah. Don't worry about me. I'm just really nervous.
I think it like the people pleaser thing jumps out, because like I know I'm a massive people pleaser. So as a man going on a date like that, I think there's an immense pressure to pay. That because it's like, oh God, like, well, I don't know how this is going to go, sort of thing. So I think that's an element. But I like what you're saying about not necessarily doing that on the first couple of dates, and doing something a bit more casual. And I think it opens up a bit of creativity, doesn't it? Because it's almost like, I don't know, it lacks a bit of imagination, doesn't it? Going for dinner.
Yeah.
And there's so many things you can do now, so many different things.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last time. I just think that I appreciate that, you know, it's a little bit presumptuous to just assume that a man can afford to pay for, like, you know, I'm not really a 3-course meal sort of girl, to be honest. But, you know, if you were expecting that, that is quite a high expectation. But my rule of thumb with it is, if the guy is the one that's asked you on the date, the guy should ask you on a date they can afford, you know, like, because they're asking you. And I think that if, you know, you have limited financial, you know, if you're a bit limited on the finance side of it, you know, go to like a rustic pub where it's like a bit more affordable, or you could just get something picky and like it's not super expensive. Because I genuinely don't know many women that would care about that. It's more that you've planned it, that you've covered it, that you're being a gent. It's not about what you spend, it's the idea behind it. And if a woman does care about that, she's not really going to be the sort of woman you want to date anyway, because it's just a bit shallow, isn't it, really?
I think it comes back to what we spoke about on that first podcast about being in a high vibration, and that for those people that don't sort of subscribe to that system of belief, just when you're like packed full of energy and you're raring and you're excited about the person you're talking to, but you're excited about life as well, and you're curious about life. And when you're in that state of being, I think it's quite easy to just chuck out like, should we go do mini golf? Or and to ask questions that are actually interesting in the chat phase, that aren't just, what is your favorite color? And, you know, to move things on in an interesting and dynamic way. And if you don't feel like you can do that, you're probably not talking to the right person, and you're probably or maybe you shouldn't be dating at the moment anyway, because you're just a little bit low and you're just a bit of an energy sponge rather than someone who's contributing energy to things.
And there are so many people dating that should not be dating. You know, if we do a catch up of my 2024 dating experiences, it was a lot of that energy of like, I could just tell that they were like burnt out of dating, and like the heart just wasn't quite in it, or they were, you know, like maybe a bit hung up on an ex but not really sure. There was just an energy of not readiness. And I was going to share this later, but I'll share it now. But my reflection
Here we go.
was, after quite a few of these sorts, I mean, I barely dated last year because, quite frankly, I couldn't really be asked, and I was, you know, kind of really taking my time to process the breakup I'd been through in 2023. So I was being sensible with it, and I sort of dipped my toe in a little bit. Then I took a few months off, and then I did a little bit of dating towards the end of the year. And the theme was, bit tired, sad man vibes. Like they didn't have that energy, Matt, of like, there was zero excitement. And I was just a bit like, I feel like I kind of want to date someone that's excited to go on a date with me. Like, not a drag. And not just that, but like the theme really, when I reflected on it, because I was like, this is weird now, was just emotional unavailability. And whether that was that they weren't in the right energy, whether it was that they maybe were a bit into that ex that they didn't think they were, like various reasons. And I looked a little bit within and was like, I think it's because I'm not emotionally available right now. Like I thought I was, but if I look at the pattern of the men I'm going on dates with and what I'm seeming to attract, like I think I'm probably giving off a bit of a vibe, which I'm not conscious of, that I'm not really available either. And so I just was like, do you know what? I've just got to like take a step back and not date for a bit, because I think that, you know, and I think that's a really important part of dating. Like look at patterns, look at who you are attracting. If everything is a bit of a non-starter, it's probably a sign that, you know, you're maybe not that ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just took a bit more time out, and it was definitely the right thing to do.
I try to translate that into mental health advice, because I think it is applicable across so many areas of people's lives. Absolutely not just relationships, although we know relationships are a massive factor that affect people's mental health. But what I see a lot of people do, and this pattern of behavior contributing to a worsening picture of their mental health, is the failure to look within. And what you just said was like, you did a little bit of self-reflecting. You realized, actually, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not in the right place for this. Maybe I need to take myself out of this. And I'm not saying that you were blaming the rest of the world, but maybe, yeah. And I'm absolutely certain that people who, well, in fact, it's been widely proven, people that take more responsibility for what's going on around them and assume that responsibility themselves end up happier, because they realize what they can control and they realize what they're in control of, and they are able to exert their influence on that and then let go of anything they can't control. I think it's a fascinating advice for dating, but also for just maintaining good mental health.
Yeah, if your heart's not in something, don't be in it. And I think that I care about other people's feelings, and I value my own time, so I value other people's time. And I knew that I was probably wasting their time, because at some point I was going to go, oh, yeah, I don't know if I'm actually that, you know, if we did start to like each other, was I actually ready to take the step? And I didn't think I was. Therefore, I don't want to waste, you know, I'm not going to waste people's time.
Yeah, of course.
And that's where I got to it. But that does take self-awareness, and it also takes what we were just saying at the beginning of the podcast. It takes that awareness to not be scared of being on your own. It, you know, it's not like I feel less than for being single, or I was like, cool, I'll just be on my own for a bit. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, really good. Brad, anything to add before we jump into the Would You Rathers?
I just I think that's so pertinent what you just said there, in terms of that kind of looking within. And I think there's probably so many people out there looking for something, but actually just putting the emphasis on other people. Oh, you know, dating apps are trash. Like all the men are kind of losers, and men doing the same about women. And it's there's kind of a fine line, isn't there? Because there's that accountability, there's that ability to say, do you know what? Actually, maybe it's not all them. Maybe there's some stuff that I need to figure out, but also not going too far the other way and being like, oh God, maybe I'm just not cut out for dating. It's a really fine line to walk, isn't it? And I think it can be so difficult with the dating apps, because there's pros and cons, as we know. I mean, my thought went to the dating apps when you were talking, in the sense of planning that first date. I think there's a lot of clues now on dating apps, and you know, people are sometimes really obvious. They're like, oh, I'd much rather go for a walk on the beach and grab a coffee than I would go for a sit-down meal. And it's like, there it is, right? Really easy. Like, just pick up on that. So there is that ability, but then the more negative side is that kind of fatigue that you talked about, in terms of actually people are just like, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah. I'll just, oh my God, how am I going to fit it all in this weekend? And then it's just like, actually, until you look within, it's really hard to find what you want outside of that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, are you dating because you actually want to find a partner or a fling or whatever it is you're looking for? You know, what's the meaning behind it? Because I think some people are really disconnected from themselves in that sense. Like, they think they want that, But then as soon as they get it, they're like, oh God, no, I feel like I'm not ready for this at all. And actually, I just kind of wanted to date and have a cocktail with someone and maybe have a snog. And they didn't think it through. But what they've maybe put on their bio and what they've sold to you in the chat before the date ends up being different. Now, I don't even think that is manipulative, because half the time I really do not think people realize how they feel about something until they start trying to do it. And then they're like, no, actually. And like, we're all guilty of that. I think we've all thought something, then we've gone on the date and gone, actually, I'm not that sure about this. And I think that we're all allowed to change our mind. I think my theory of it is just be honest. You know, if you're kind of just dipping your toe in something after a relationship and you're not quite sure if you 100% want something full on, don't do the bullshit, let's go with the flow, no pressure. Just be like, I don't know quite at this moment whether I'm ready or not, and I'm not sure if I'm going to know until I'm dating. Are you cool with that? Like, you know, and leave it as an open conversation, because I think that people appreciate honesty over bullshit or not really bringing it up full stop, you know?
I think that's a really strong answer.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's something that men and women, obviously I can only relate to it from a man's perspective, but do men struggle with that because, and maybe women, because there's a misconception of trying to put yourself out there on a dating app as what somebody might want, rather than putting yourself out on the dating app as this is me. Do you know what I mean? So I think guys go for, well, you know, if I'm looking to bag a hot date, that person is looking for somebody to be in a long-term relationship with, and so I need to project those vibes. Whereas actually, I agree with what you're saying. Actually, just out you know, this is who I am, and let's see what I can attract, and start going for that idea of attracting the type of people you want, as opposed to being this sort of slightly fake, I think this is what, you know, people are looking for, and so I'm going to push that, and I'm going to choose those photos and all of that sort of stuff.
And we know from just life, you know, people on TV and podcasts you listen to, the things you relate to are the authentic ones. You don't relate to like curated, like really put together, really thought out profiles. Like, I tend to avoid the ones where there's like loads of, although I like an athletic guy, loads of like topless CrossFit in the gym, because I'm just a bit like, I could already tell you had that body if you kept your top on. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain things where, to me, that gives the signal that they're looking for sex. Now, they might not be at all, but that's the impression they're giving, is to be like overtly half naked, like sweating. And it's just a bit like, you don't really look like you're looking for a long-term relationship. Now, that guy might be looking for one, but the way he's putting himself across, probably like you said, Brad, isn't really like him, like how he is day to day when he's at home or when he's walking his dog. And I think that authenticity is key. Like, if you're, whether it's, you know, meeting people in real life and dating, or whether it's on a dating app, make a profile that actually represents you. And if that doesn't get very many likes, well, you've done the filtering already, because you're being yourself. And you've got just so much more chance of attracting somebody in who likes you for you, or, you know, you're not false advertising, is basically what I'm saying. You're showing up as yourself.
It kind of goes to that principle of kind of work smarter, not harder, doesn't it? Because I think so many people set the profile up, because it can be a bit disheartening if you're on dating apps and, you know, you're not getting a lot of attention. But you're right. Like, actually, you kind of got to go with, let stuff happen in the background, haven't you? Because actually you will be filtering out those people that you don't necessarily want to be with anyway, but you just need to be prepared that actually, you know, you might have a mate that's like continuously getting people, you know, popping up on his profile, and you might not be that guy, and that might take a bit of a hit in terms of your confidence, but you probably are doing yourself a favor in the long run, I think.
Yeah, like, I don't go on many dates because I work out. I mean, some things you can only work out in real life, but you can do a bit of research before that point to work out whether you think you're aligned. Like, are your values aligned? Are you looking for the same sort of thing? How do you spend your time? That sort of thing, to me, is like the first stage of, do I go for a drink? Do I go on a date with them? Because there's just some questions that they'd immediately answer, and you'd be like, we're not going to work. that's not going to be aligned enough. And I don't mean like silly petty stuff. I mean like the important stuff. So if you have kids or something and they're like, oh no, I've never really dated anyone kids and like, I'm not really sure how I feel about it, then you'd be like, well, that's a no. You know, like it's just kind of being wise, like wising up a bit with this stuff, and don't just date people because you think they're hot, even though they're telling you loads of things that you know won't align with you just because you fancy them. Like, hey, you're wasting your own time and theirs. Like, it's pointless. And I just think attraction's so much more than that anyway. Better off asking the aligned questions and then being like, cool, I'll go on a date.
I remember you saying on the last show you came on, you said that men were particularly susceptible to that. And I think you're right. That whole like, oh yeah, but she's really hot. She's really hot, so we're just going to go for it. And actually, you do maybe put aside some of the things you are looking for because actually they're just really hot, and that can be true. I guess you could explore that, and it might still work, but there may be some challenges down the line there, mightn't there?
I think if they're hot, but you've got stuff in common or you've got the same values, go on the date.
Yeah.
But I think don't just base it on, oh, I'd quite like to have some, you know, because that's not going to be a marriage, probably.
I'm chuckling because it's a mental health thing. I get caught in this spiral of double thinking, of like seeing she's hot, so wanting to go on a date with her and like working towards that, before my brain really kicks in and says, are you just trying to set up a date because she's hot?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I'm doing is thinking, yeah, I think I am just trying to set up a date because look at how hot she is. So I'm trying to set up a date because of that. But then I think I convinced myself that we're not getting on because she's hot. She can't be hot and we get on. That can't be a thing. Like, I tend to rule that out as an option. And then I end up thinking, right, well, she's too hot because we're not going to get on because she's hot. So I'm not going to go out with her. What a bitch.
Also, what I always think is when you're in the mindset of, oh my God, they're like, he's really hot or she's really hot, and you're being led by that. I often think, you know, we talked about on my podcast, Matt, about how we were like, we grew into our good looks. That, you know, the teenagers were a bit awkward.
I grew out of mine.
You know how we were just talking about we weren't always confident, and that, I mean, I definitely wasn't. I was very awkward in my teenage years. I had no experience with boys. I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that part of me, when I'm going to, oh my God, they're so hot, I want to date with them, that's teenage Claire.
Okay.
That pick me. Oh my God, that guy's going to pick me. Wow. And it's like the teenage part of me, not inner child, it's like inner teenager, is so thrilled that some hot guy is going to pick me. But adult Claire, who like values myself as a whole person, is like, babe, he's not like, you haven't got enough in common. And don't get me wrong, like the two things can be, like you were just saying, they can be hot and intelligent. They can be hot and interesting. They can be hot and you can get on. But if it's just that one thing that's drawing you, I sometimes think it's like a wounding thing. Like we want to be picked, or there's something that's being triggered and we're reacting from that place rather than a grounded, grown-up energy of what we actually want future us to have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very, very healthy approach. Very, very healthy approach.
So Nibbo, can I...
Oh, go on, Brad.
Can I just ask you a question on that? Because I think you probably described quite nicely the
this is
minefield.
A nasty comment. I already know it's not.
It's a genuine question. It is a genuine question.
When you're ready. Right, you go for it.
Because I think you actually articulated really well what a minefield it is for blokes kind of dating and that whole like, oh well, she's too hot, so it's not going to work, and because there's an element of self-sabotage in what you described in that thought process there. And Claire, because she's very, maybe I will weave in a little dig, but I hadn't intended to, but. Claire, because she's kind of very mature and astute and she's confident, has unpicked that actually stuff like that for her is teenage Claire. What do you reckon it is for you from a mental health point of view?
Is it your playful feelings?
It's actually more of a case of what was it for me, because I feel like I've got over it. So I actually listened to a podcast which didn't belong to any of us. And I listened to a Mel Robbins podcast, and her take on dating was quite different to Claire's. And it was like, just go on a date, like just go out, just go and see them. And like, if you like them, you like them, and if you don't, you don't. Move on. So I actually, like, I'm carrying an injury at the moment. Not that you can tell, but pre-injury and pre-Christmas, I just went on. Well, there's only two like dates in quick succession. To be like, I'm not sure if I like this person or not. I'm just going to meet them. And, like, I spoke to them both and said, and they were both crazy hot. Like, that's part of it. So like, I think I'm through it now, because kind of what's to lose, really. Like, if we don't get on, we don't get on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think once I recognised that I was doing that and that I was ruling people out because they were hot, and also we talked in our last dating special about the benefits of therapy, the group therapy sessions that I used to go to. We talked in that about the idea of second besting yourself and putting yourself second on purpose, so that you didn't lose first place, and it was kind of like a self-preservation technique, and that there was no reason to do that, and then the therapist, like, this is why therapy is so good, because they see stuff I don't see. She was like, okay, so you'd put yourself in second place, and then you'd be assured second place. Those of us that did that were like, yeah, I recognise that behaviour. And then she asked, like, what's wrong with second place? It's pretty good. Like, when you think about the whole human race, if you've come second, that's pretty excellent, really, isn't it? And we were all like, oh yeah. So I lost the guilt and the shame of second placing myself, of just, I'll take the next step down. And as soon as I lost that guilt and shame, I felt able to be more along the lines of, I'll go on the date with a really hot woman and let's see how it goes, because what have I got to lose? Other than
I think you
a
absolutely
couple of
should
quid
go
for a
on
drink.
dates with hot women if they're up for it.
What do you mean, if they're up for it?
No, as in, like, if you match with someone and they're hot and they want to go on a date with you, go. Like, I'm not saying follow my rules of being selective. And why I do that is, by the way, to do with what I've learned in my own dating journey over the last sort of 9 years of what is really important to me in a guy I'm going to be in a long-term relationship with. And a big part of it is, like, I don't want to sound a wanker saying this, but being sort of intellectually interested in them, having like interesting conversations and having that level of like having fun and laughing, but also being able to have that. And if that isn't there for me, like, I'm not going to probably fancy them. So I've learned that, and you can usually establish that quite quickly in a bit of a chat. So I think I've just learned that, I've done the go on dates with just hot people, but that isn't there at all. And you're like, okay, which if you're looking for fun is great. Like, who cares? But if you're looking for more than that, and again, it's just about not wasting other people's time. If I know myself so well that I know that personality to me is so key. And like, if I click with someone in that way, there's a good chance I'm going to form a connection with you, because it's quite rare for me to find that with people.
Yeah.
And also, just, I really lack time. My daughter's dad lives up north, so she sees him 2 weekends a month, and that's my child-free time. So I have to also be quite mindful of my child-free time and sacred. If you're someone who gets, midweek change up with childcare and stuff, and I would definitely recommend doing what you were saying with Mel Robbins, like, just get out there. Because I think if I had more time, I would go on more dates. And it's a mixture of reasons why I'm selective. And I think that there's nothing wrong with just going for a coffee, going for a drink, because I think we talked about in the last podcast, I think with guys especially, very quickly whether it's potential girlfriend material, wifey, shag, or not at all. I think you literally know within like seconds. So it is a good idea, I think, if you're a guy, to just get yourself out there. And also, if you're trying to build up your confidence from a self-esteem confidence point of view, it's good to just practice dating and just get back out there, because dating can feel awkward. There's nothing wrong with a bit of practice. Just going for a drink, practicing conversation with somebody, engaging with people again. If you've been in a long-term relationship or you've been single for ages, that can feel really rusty. And I think that getting back out there is part of it. So yeah, I definitely recommend it.
In terms of advice for men, I think that's another place where paying for the first date in particular, and I would keep it low key, is really a really positive step for men to be able to do. Because if you are just thinking, I just want to get out there, I just want to have some conversations, just want to meet some people, I just want to see how it goes. Also, like, you're both outlaying your time, but if you're the only one outlaying some money on that date, I don't mean you're buying that other person's time, but I mean like, well, you've outlaid the money and you've kind of done your best to take care of that person and for it to be an enjoyable experience for that other person and a learning experience for you. But we need to, on the subject of time, we need to keep jumping on with stuff. I've got a load of would you rather questions here, Claire, because we love our little would you rathers.
I loved it last time. This is so funny.
I'm going to fire them at you fairly rapidly, but the first one I'm going to fire at you and Brad because I want to hear both your answers, and it's bang on the subject of what we were just talking about. So let's start with Claire. Claire, would you rather adore your partner or have your partner adore you? So let's say it's statistically impossible for you to like each other the exact same amount because like there's so many various factors. Let's go for in terms of attraction, because that's a big one for a lot of people, especially men, and like what we see. Would you rather they thought you were hotter, or would you rather think that they were hotter than you?
Oh, that's a complicated question.
I know.
That's really complicated.
I'm glad you're going
because
first.
I think for a really successful marriage, or the marriages that I know that are really successful in long-term relationship, the guy always probably loves and adores and probably fancies the woman slightly more than the woman does. However, I'm absolutely cool with going out with someone hotter than me. I'm like, yeah, amazing, wow, like he's so gorgeous, and like people looking at him doesn't bother me at all. Like that wouldn't trigger me in the slightest. So what would be my answer? I think I would maybe want them to think I was the hotter one, just so that, because I do think the balance of adoration is like kind of needs to be there with the guy. I think they need to kind of think you're like goddess material for like long-term things to work.
Okay.
Meaning like a really fairy tale silly way. But I mean for them to just be like, I think she's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that does need to be there. And I think women are a bit, like for me personally, I obviously have to be attracted, but I think that I'm very loyal. And if I'm in something, I'm in it. And I think, I don't know, that's really complicated. I don't think I've answered that very well, have I?
No, I think you've given us some of your thoughts. And after Brad's given us his thoughts, you might want to reflect on what he said. But Brad, what do you reckon? Would you rather adore or be adored?
I just agree with Claire.
Not allowed.
Do you know?
Not a valid answer.
Yeah.
Because you said the hot one. Adore and hot is two different things in my brain.
Yeah, you are probably quite right on that. But just interpret it any way that you feel appropriate.
Yeah, I'm with you, Claire. Shit question, Nibbo. Adore and hot, totally different things. No, it's a good question. I think it's a really challenging one. I tell you what, I'm not sure what my answer is. I'll muddle my way through it and see what happens. So I made a joke last night when we were sort of chatting, when I said I am massively punching right now.
It's not a joke.
It's not a joke. It's 100 and Claire came back in a very respectful way. Oh yeah, you both lovely.
Oh, but that's really what I think. I think you're a good match. Like I wasn't bullshitting you. This is the thing. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think you are equally attractive. I don't think your girlfriend's hotter than you. I think she's a babe. But I think that you're an attractive guy and you match well. Like, it's interesting because you're like, oh, I'm punching. And I just think so my last relationship I was in, I thought he was hotter than me. I think I'm pretty hot, but I thought he was hotter. And I didn't mind that at all. But when we broke up, all my mates were like, fucking no way, you were the much hotter one. I was like, what, really? Like, so it's just about perception. I think we might think they're hot. I think it's about I think I actually, if I'm thinking about this, I think I like to think my partner's hotter than me. I think I'm a Leo, and I think because I don't know, I think attraction's quite a big thing, and I think I am not bothered by them being hotter than me. So maybe for me to be really, really into it, I need that bit of adoring energy, like looking up to them, if I'm being honest.
Ooh, interesting. Brad, you haven't got long.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know, when we first started dating, it was something that I didn't feel confident about. because I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, you know, she's
I've been there.
way hotter than me. And it was like what you were saying before. And so it felt a little bit scary, a little bit vulnerable. And I think based on some of my experience in the past, it probably prodded at a few insecurities.
Mm.
But obviously I you know, persisted with things, and I've kind of feel like in my perception we've leveled out, and that's not anything to do with me all of a sudden, you know, thinking, yeah, I'm quite attractive. That's to do with her and the way that she has spoken and the conversations that we've had and some of the kind of affirmations and reassurances that I've been given. And so it almost went from for me feeling like this to leveling out, but that's based on how things have developed and things have evolved.
And maybe that part of you that was like, oh, this is ridiculous, she's so much hotter than me, and you felt insecure, maybe that was teenage Brad.
Yeah, 100% actually.
You shared with me on your confidence journey, you know, the or you feeling not like being more awkward when you were younger and stuff. I feel like that was teenage you, and you, the one that she's got to know and fallen for. And obviously it'll be in how she speaks to you and appreciates you, which has leveled that out. But I feel like you've just you're in your power now. You're like an adult Brad because you've relaxed into the relationship. Whereas I think at the beginning, there's different parts of us that can be triggered when we feel insecure.
Yeah. Go free
Wrong
therapy
answer.
right here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the aim, isn't it? I had a girlfriend once who I had to keep asking her, like, do you look like how I think you look? Like, is this a shallow Hal situation where actually you're horrific and that's why you're so enthusiastic about being with me? Because look at you. And she was like, no, I'm pretty sure that's how I look. And I was like, but why are you so into me? That was pre my most recent bout of therapy, but I spent a lot of time being like, what are you doing here? Why are you here?
That shallow Hal thing is so relatable. Yeah, it's a great film. But you know, and I'll say stuff to her and be like, and she's like, she's actually she can be quite critical of herself, and I'm like, are you serious? Like when you look in the mirror, do you see the same thing that I see? And it highlights, I guess, that actually it's just on both sides of a relationship, isn't it? And in order for a relationship to work, you've got to figure those bits out in one another, so you can both level up as opposed to leveling down, I suppose.
Right, on the subject of in relationships, we're moving on to our next question. Claire, let's just ask this to just Claire. Let's not drag Brad into it again. This one I find really interesting. Would you rather, this is like a deep into a relationship, or maybe it's not, maybe you set your stall out early on, I don't know. Would you rather a confrontation that clears the air every time you have a disagreement, or would you rather have a partner who to your face agrees with everything you say as if his mantra is happy wife, happy life? So like you never argue, but does that suggest he's actually not bringing his genuine self to the relationship and he's just nodding his head along with whatever you're saying?
I think with this, a conflict which is then resolved is better than a conversation not happening. But I think it needs to be healthy conflict. I don't think there should be loads of confrontation and like unhealthy conflict, because whether you clear the air or not, that's just toxic. Because do you know those relationships that thrive off like argument and then make up sounds?
Yeah.
Yeah, they might clear the air for 5 minutes, but then it's back into an argument. They need to be conversations, like uncomfortable conversations that clear the air. I think that's the aim. You know, I've been in a long-term relationship with someone who literally never, ever said a bad word about me, ever. And I was like, and we did very occasionally argue, but hardly at all. But we had like couple therapy, and he would just be like, no, Claire's amazing. But he was doing things outside of the relationship that would make you be like, well, obviously he's not happy.
Okay.
Like he couldn't admit it. And I found it so frustrating because I'd be like, I mean, I'm great, but I'm not that fucking great. Like, come on, like there has to be things I do that are annoying. And he couldn't vocalize that, which meant the relationship failed. Because there obviously were things that weren't great. that he couldn't vocalize. So I think it's better to have the conversations.
Yeah.
And clear than to not. But keep those conflicts healthy. I think it's more about my advice with arguments and conflict with relationship is always focus on like listening and working out the issue rather than winning.
This might be difficult because it's your personal experience, but why do you think he was not raising anything? Why do you think he was never saying a bad word about you or about the relationship?
I think because he was doing bad things outside of the relationship to me.
Okay.
That he felt bad about, and he had a lot of guilt, and he couldn't admit that it was my fault because it kind of means that stuff was his fault. But I think it was a guilt thing. I think it was like, no, I'm going to take the blame. Or maybe it was more of like he wanted to look good in front of the therapist. I don't know. But I found it baffling. And I think that, no person is perfect and everybody triggers people and everybody can improve. But yeah, who knows? I never got to the bottom of it.
No. It's interesting, though, isn't it? I think some men, when I say some men, I think the two men that I think of immediately when I say that are me and Brad, are more the type of like, oh, I'll just stay quiet. I won't rock the boat. I won't. That's pissed me off, but I'm not going to say anything about it. Brad, are you like that? I think I was like that in a previous relationship.
That is me, and it ties back to this being a people pleaser. And I used to take a lot of shit on the chin actually, and just try and absorb it. And I never felt comfortable. And it's interesting because I'm doing a course at the minute, a trauma-informed practice and mental health course. And it's really interesting, and we've been exploring lots of things. They keep making me cry because I'm not used to exploring all this deep emotional stuff. But I'm comfortable with it, and actually, I've learned an awful lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about kind of emotional development and accessing that part of the brain that I probably closed off to. But interestingly, I was talking to Kirsty about it at the weekend, and I said my little group actually, we were all like, yeah, we're all sort of people pleasers, really. And I actually said to her like, I've done quite a bit of learning, and yeah, it's about supporting children and teenagers, but there are elements of the course that are for adults as well. And I said, like, my learning around relationships, and she was like, okay, well, what sort of stuff? And I was like, okay, like I said, actually, if I'm not happy with something that you're doing, I need to say it, and that is a big step forward for me, because normally I just like, fine, not, and because I'm so laid back. By the time I've slept and the next day, I'm kind of over it. But what stands out?
Not though.
No, that's it. And the big thing
I was going to say my rule of thumb with this is, because you were just saying, Matt, like, do you bring it up? It depends what it is, but if it's hurt your feelings or it's overstepped your boundaries, you've got to say it. Yeah. Hurting feelings, like, nobody wants to be in a relationship with somebody that like is regularly hurting your feelings. And if somebody is like, people that are like really bantery all the time, and like, don't get me wrong, I love to laugh a lot in a relationship, but I wouldn't do well with someone who was like constantly like name calling or like bantering, but like kind of taking the piss in a bit of a not very nice way. Like, I don't want that in a relationship. Yeah. So like that, I would nip in the bud and be like, I don't really like that. Like with someone I'm romantically, I think we can have a laugh, but things like that, I think you've got to work out, and it's all about knowing yourself, right? What are your boundaries and what hurts your feelings? And it's assessing, I'd say pause with it. I think if someone's done something that you're like, oh, that bothered me, go away and have a think about it and be like, did it bother me because it actually was out of order? Or did it bother me because it's triggered something about somebody else? Because it could be that they've done something that's reminded you of an ex, or something that someone said to you before and they didn't mean it in a mean way, but somebody in the past has said it. So it's working out whether it's like a them problem or a you problem.
Yeah.
And if it's a them problem and they're doing something that is bothering you, you have to say it, because the problem is the relationship will end over it.
Yeah.
Because if that keeps going on, it won't work.
Would you recommend, Claire, even if you deduce that it's a you problem, yeah, I feel as if that'd still be useful to share and say to a partner, like, this isn't your fault. Yeah. My past isn't your fault, but just to let you know, this has been an issue before and I might be a bit sensitive to it.
Yeah, absolutely share that. Now you can say, oh, I've been in my head a little bit about something that happened the other day with you, and like I've thought about it and it actually isn't you, it's a me thing. But I wanted to share it with you that like it bothered me a bit, and I think it's something that I maybe need to work on a little bit. because then they can be more mindful about their language. Or it could be something stupid like, like going for a night out. Maybe your girlfriend goes for a night out and you don't hear from her at all when she said she'd check in. And if you're someone that's maybe been cheated on or something in the past, that would maybe trigger you. And if they were to just know that that's important to you and you just want to like check in text, like whatever, that's an easy fixable thing. That is then a rule that's sort of in your relationship. And I just don't think there's anything wrong with that, being clear about the things that make you feel secure in it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean someone needs to go around like babying you, but like you are allowed to have insecurities and you're allowed to share them. And we've all like, we're in our like early 40s now, like, we've lived a life, we've been through things, and we're all going to have triggers. So I think my thing is always raise it, but just don't raise it in a ungrounded sort of elevated. So like an angry, pissed off state, like pause a bit with it and then bring it up in like a calm way.
And I think it's really important to do that early on, isn't it? And not kind of think, oh, well, it's the early stages, so I don't want to rock the boat, because it just makes it that much harder down the line. Well, the big thing that stood out from the last show that we did on this, when you came on, Claire, was you talked about resentment being the biggest killer of relationships. And I think unless you're having those conversations, then you're going to come unstuck at some point. And that, for me, was the point of learning. And I think I probably learned quite a lot in 2014 about myself and about other people and my boundaries.
You mean
and
2024?
So what did I say?
2014?
24. Hey, look, I learned a lot in 2014 as well. It's a particularly special year for me.
2014 was the year that I learned a lot about myself.
But yeah, so I did learn a lot about that. So, but I was conscious, and I thought it was interesting because actually this weekend I had that conversation saying, yeah, I need to make sure if you do something that bothers me, I actually say it. Like, that's a me problem. That's not a her problem. And I am working on being more open. On kind of Sunday, she was like, oh, did you go for a surf this morning? Because she'd had a bit of a lie-in, and I was thinking about getting up and going early, and loads of stuff on my mind. And ordinarily I would just park that. But I was like, actually, do you know what? When I went to sleep last night, I actually started to feel really anxious about some stuff that I needed to do. And so actually now I've just been downstairs, but what I have been doing is working on some of that stuff that was causing me a bit of anxiety, which I never would have had those conversations before. And I think that is kind of partly because we do this now. And I'm like, we need to do this better, but also just lots of learning as well.
So it's just letting her be your partner.
Yeah.
So she could be like, babe, like, can I help you? Do you want me to shall I make breakfast? Like, you know if your partner's got anxiety or is like restless about something, so that you can chip in and do something to make their day a little bit easier. And she can't do that if you hadn't told her. So well done. Like, I think for a guy particularly, I think feels quite vulnerable to say you're anxious or worrying about something, because you feel like you're shit together and you shouldn't be worrying about anything. And it's like, we all get anxious. We all do. Like, anxiety is my main mental health battle. And people are always so shocked about that with me. They're like, what? You're so like, everyone always describes me as really grounded. And I'm like, are you for real? I think I got so good at acting grounded. And most of the time now I am, but like I overall have like a fairly anxious nervous system, and always have done. And I think people are always really shocked about that. And especially if I get in a relationship and I settle, like I can get anxiety and stuff. I think because I'm not like breathing into a paper bag and like sobbing, they don't really get it. But it's like, no, it's like an internal anxious battle, like where my brain's going into, and it's like an internal thing. So I think you have to share that stuff, and you have to tell them like how that manifests you. Because my question to you would be, how did that anxiety manifest? Is it like you can't sleep? Is it like palpitations? Or is it like, my brain's just really crazy? I'd want to know the details so that I could help with that,
Yeah.
The thing that I'm laughing about here, and Brad and I are going to redo our own episodes on our podcast where we interview each other, and I've got some absolute belters lined up to ask Brad to dig into. But a bit of a clue of what will be coming up with that is that Brad has said on this episode that he's such a relaxed, such a laid-back, chilled-out guy, and he couldn't sleep and he was too anxious. And I think for both of us, probably, the reason why my ears prick up, because I identify as in the same way as Brad, about being relaxed and laid back and chilled out, but that there are things that do make you anxious, Brad, and that do make you stressed and worried. But I think we present to the world that laid back, chilled out facade, whereas it might not actually be the genuine one.
And you can be laid back in some ways. So I'm very laid back in a relationship. So I'm not going to be on you or needy or expecting I'm like pretty chilled, but that doesn't mean I'm like really laid back in all areas of my life. Do you know what I mean? And I am to an extent, but my internal experience is that for me, it's more about being okay. And then one thing tips me over. And then I struggle with being in sort of an anxious mindset then for like maybe a couple of weeks, which really burnout. So it's really kind of doing too much, probably repressing and not realizing it. And then suddenly being like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed. And then I struggle to get out of that anxious sort of mindset. But obviously I've got the tools now, I have a great therapist. I have lots of grounding techniques. I'm a coach. So I can get there, but sometimes it still feels quite crippling. And I think people don't realize that. And it affects my sleep too, my eating, like everything. But it's not chronic, it's not like 6 months. I've never taken medication for it. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact your life. And if something impacts your life, you should share it with a partner. And I think with me, do you know what? And this is a bit of a vulnerable chat, but I think in relationships and dating, I think it's been a bit of an issue in the sense of people meet me and they kind of are like, oh yeah, this is what you're like all the time, which most of the time it is. But then they don't really like it when I am a bit like, I'm feeling quite anxious and I kind of want that person to ground me a bit. They're kind of like, oh no, I'm better in the dynamic of where you're quite relaxed and being the looking after me sort of person. Like, well, I've got to do it. I don't really like you like that. I prefer you when you're like confident coach, Claire. And it's like finding that balance of kind of, that's my battle with dating, is bringing that quite early on, like that vulnerable side, and not just being, like you were saying, like laid back Matt and chilled Brad. Like there's other sides to us. And I think that bringing that to the surface quicker to get that aligned person, because if you're only being one side of you, you're only going to attract a certain type of person and they're going to want that version,
Yeah, you might as well find out early on.
Yeah.
Thank you for having a vulnerable share there, Claire. I appreciate that. And as we said again on the first episode, there's always so much more we could talk about. There's 2 more questions I really want to ask you, and we'll see if we've got time for like the alternate versions of you or not. So would you rather? People always complain about dating apps and about. I hear a lot of complaints about how there's not enough good people on there, or just not enough. Not enough good people on there. So, simple would you rather, as a single woman, would you rather there were way more men, say double, triple the amount of men on dating apps, but there's also the same percentage increase in women?
Mm-hmm.
So your competition has increased drastically as well as your options have increased drastically. Or would you rather way fewer men and way fewer women? So you're one of a much smaller number, but also there's a far smaller number of men to choose from.
I would like more men, more women.
Ooh, I feel like you're unique in that.
I'm confident in myself and I think I bring a lot to the table. So I'm not threatened by there being more competition as such, but I think that we'd all benefit from a little bit more option-wise. However, it does only take one person for you to find your person. So
man, I've been saying that forever.
You could have 10 guys and that's it, but one of them is your guy. So I don't believe in necessarily like quantity is better than quality. I definitely don't. But I suppose what I'm saying is I'm not insecure, so I wouldn't care. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, make it less women, so then I've got less competition. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good, secure answer. Brad, anything to add to that before we go into the final would you rather?
No, I don't think so. I kind of felt that Claire was going to go that way for the reasons she gave. Actually, I thought, nah, she's got this. She's not worried about the competition. She's just, let's get some better people in there for her.
Strong. One thing that actually I think we've glossed over slightly is this part of the male mental health crisis being the attention that some men feel like they get on dating apps, and that they don't get enough attention from the type of women that they want attention from. And I just think that's worth a mention. We're not going to dig into it now because we don't have time to dig into it. Maybe Brad and I will do a special on that, just the two of us.
I mean, that's a female issue too. That isn't just a male thing.
Is it? What is it like from
Absolutely.
the female perspective?
I think I rarely get people that I think are on my level. And I mean in all areas. I get a lot of like way older guys, like my dad's age. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, not my dad's age, but like too old for me, or I get really young, which I don't say either of those. So I struggle to attract people that are my age, that are people I'd actually have a relationship with. I get people that are too old that are like, I can treat you right, I'll give you the life, and I'm like, I've already got a life. That doesn't sell it. Like, you're still 65.
I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but there are stats about like the bottom 50% of men get like no attention, like nothing.
I mean, that's horrific, isn't it? Like, I just think people are shallow, man. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about looks. I'm talking more about like, I just don't get people that are a decent match, and that's based on age, sort of the things we would be interested in, and looks is part of it. But I get a lot of people that I'm just like, it's just weird. Like, they're people that are just a no immediately based on certain things. And I'm not the only woman that has been like, I'm struggling to get people that are sort of the similar age to me that approach me. I think especially women at our age, we get a lot of younger guys.
Yeah.
That are seeing it as like a flex, right? Like shag a cougar or whatever. But it's kind of, there's a lot of that. And that just feels quite gross. You know, you're just like, this is just a bit it. Like, I don't know. And then it goes to a bit like, is that all I'm attracting? Like, where are the guys that are my age, you know?
On the subject of what you'd like to attract then, Claire, I've saved this one for last. I think it's a belter. Right, would you rather date and be in a relationship with, and bearing in mind this is 2025 now, and the future is coming fast, would you rather date a Terminator-style cyborg who is indistinguishable from an actual human being, other than he needs charging up at night like a phone? You can order, and you can specify the height, eye colour, hair colour, vibrating robo-dick, whatever you want. Like... looks like the most amazing thing. Can have an AI conversation with you. There was an advert I sent to Brad today that we might even put out in line with this. The Google Pixel phone is advertising that it can be your mate. You can have a conversation with it like a friend, and you can ask it things, and it won't be like, the next train is at 7:45. It'll be having a conversation with you like a friend.
Yeah.
So would you rather date that? And you can specify it, like this guy could be 6'7", and like he's never going to bold or anything like that. Or a real actual human man who doesn't meet your checklist, has imperfections and baggage.
A human man. I don't want a robot that like love me because I've told it, like, can you fancy me? And can you talk to me about this? Like, that sounds so unfulfilling. And I think I've clarified, like, I'm someone who needs fulfilling conversation. And like, I'm sure I could have a great chat with some AI robot, but like, I know it's like not real. I'm freaking like the authentic coach sort of person. Like, I need authenticity. So it'd have to be a real person. Also vibrating robo dick. I'm not into vibrators anyways.
Another vulnerable share. Thank you, Claire.
Well, I don't know about sharing that. I think there's nothing more beautiful than genuine human connection. And whether that is a lovely conversation on a bus stop with someone really random and you just have a really connecting conversation, or the person you fall in love with. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing more beautiful than that. And you can only get that from a human being and a person that has lived a life and I'm so sort of taken in by people that have lived a life and have got an exciting life to share, and they've learnt lessons along the way that have made them the person that they are. Baggage, you saying they've got baggage, like that. I mean, I don't like that term anyway, but I think that, what does that even mean? What, you've had a life before and you've got a child? That's not baggage. That's amazing. Like, you've got an ex-wife, okay, Like, I don't know. I think again that comes down to like how healthy your self-esteem and confidence is. Because I'm never bothered by exes, like ever, as long as they're respectful. Like, I would never. I don't know. I've never deemed someone to have baggage. I think that's someone who's looking for perfection and an easy life, and I don't think that is life. That's not real life.
What I love is that I think the reason I ask that question is because I think men need to hear that. Because I think if, as a man, if you open yourself up to the more toxic sides of social media and this alpha male culture stuff, you could start to believe that you need to be almost too good to be true, that you need to be ripped, that you need to be 6'7", that you need to be all incredible in bed. You need to be all these amazing things that are inauthentic at their core, and that actually I think it's really useful for people to hear. Do you know what in terms of dating, what women want is someone authentic, someone real, someone they can actually connect with, rather than this AI version of a human, which is around the corner. Like, they'll be here soon.
Most people will fall in love with someone who makes them feel seen. That's it. Like, yeah, it can be attraction, yeah, it can be all of that, but so much of it is like, this person makes me feel seen and understood. And if that goes both ways, like, that's not something that's found often. And a robot can't do that.
Well, do you reckon a robot will ever be able to do that? Do you reckon a robot will ever be able to, like, never going to forget your birthday, never going to forget anniversaries, never going to forget special dates?
It's just so soulless. Like, nothing about that is interesting to me.
Brad, you're desperate to come in, I can tell.
I want to know what you guys think the majority of men would say to answer that question.
I think it's really interesting because I think men get villainized every time you see the new, like, Tomorrow's World story on social media about the next, because it's sex, isn't it? The next sex doll, AI sex doll that can now blink and say your name and has got like realistic boobs and stuff. Women have been having sex with robots for decades. Like, there's only one part of that robot that women have been having sex with, but it's been happening. I think, I'll tell you what I would say. I think men who've had a bad experience in dating, or in relationships rather, who feel as if the dynamic that they were in was just, I earn the money, I provide the house, I keep everything safe, you look good. I mean, it's a very old-fashioned, antiquated approach. You look good and are there for sex. I can see that maybe not in 2025, but in 2035, as soon as that, I think there'd be men openly in relationships with those types of, what are you going to call them? Creations, beings, cyborgs. What if they're from this bottom 50% that are getting no interest on dating apps? So the cyborg is a alternative to rejection on dating apps rather than an alternative to a real person. Because we're all pushed for time, Brad, how about we get the listeners to pull out their own takeaways from this evening's episode or today's episode?
Yeah, nice. I like it.
They can do their own take. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do the work for you unless you pay us.
Let us know.
Yeah.
And also, if you're interested in dating Claire, you've listened to this, then feel free to message. You'll go through mine and Nibbo's intensive vetting system. And if you get through that, we might introduce you
for a small fee. If someone dated you after listening to this and then didn't know something that you'd mentioned in this, it's clear they're not listening, and that was a key thing.
They'd have to come on the show and put themselves out there as well to even have a shot, I think.
Let's have
Claire
have an online date on the show.
Oh yeah.
There's a function on this where you can invite audience members. We can all just sit and watch. It'd be like the lockdown again. Wink wink, nudge nudge. So that was Claire Elizabeth Coaching. All her contact details, because she operates as a confidence coach specifically for women, but all her contact details are going to be in the show notes. So if you've listened to her and thought she's going to be someone that's going to be interesting to work with, she's not just there for a chat. I know we just had a chat this evening, but she's someone that would be interesting to work with. Then her contact details are going to be in the show notes, and you can find her services there. From us, Brad and I, we're really appreciative that she has come on. So thank you very much, Claire. And you'll find more great shows coming from the Mental Health Takeaways team, all the way through
2025.
all the way through 2025. Thank you. Good night. Happy Valentine's Day.